I watched him slide the hefty beige folder across the glass table like he was handing me a lunch menu. I could sign it or not. I stayed still. His smile was too perfect, the kind you get from practicing in front of a mirror every day. On the TV behind him, the new logo blinked, an infinity symbol tangled in itself. The room reeked of citrus toner and regret, one of those shiny meeting rooms they shove veterans like me into before swapping us out for something flashier. He leaned back in the chair I'd chosen 3 CFOs ago. He tapped the pen on the folder twice, then dropped the bomb. "We bought your company and your silence. Both came cheap." His words didn't just sting, they crashed into me like a slow-motion wreck. My ears buzzed, like I was drowning. I stared at him. Blonde, baby-faced, probably thinks passwords still need just 4 digits. My boots had more years than his LinkedIn page. He gestured again. "Standard severance, above market. And the NDA, of course. We really appreciate your foundational efforts." The way he said it, you'd think I built a sandwich, not a cloud system that weathered 7 product pivots, a ransomware scare, and 3 near acquisitions. I looked down at the papers. Severance math scribbled over in Sharpie. Someone had tried to revise my original exit terms sloppily, like I wouldn't notice. "I assume you're aware of the changeover to the new infrastack," he added, like he was doing me a favor. "DevOps is rebuilding from the ground up. Much cleaner, much fresher. You understand?" I nodded once, not in agreement, just to let him hear the silence. He didn't get it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table now, trying to close the deal like I was a prospect. "No hard feelings, right? It's just alignment, culture fit. You get it." Oh, I got it. What he didn't get, what nobody on his little war council got, was that the bones of their back end still had my fingerprints. 12 years of incremental, paranoid, airtight design. Duct-taped with audit logs and disaster recoveries I hoped we'd never need. No one asked me to do all that. They just asked for uptime. I gave them an architecture. Buried inside that structure, deep enough to bore through memory, was a contract, a relic from our Series A days, back when no one cared who signed what, as long as the server stayed up. A hosting agreement, grandfathered in, tied to my name, the original LLC. It had one clause no one ever noticed, because no one ever needed to until now. I stood up. He offered a hand. I left it hanging like the promise of a Christmas bonus. I picked up the folder, didn't open it, just walked to the door, heels clicking like a countdown. My last look back wasn't for drama. It was to memorize his face the second he realized I wasn't going to give him what he wanted. By the time I hit the elevator, I had already opened my phone, logged into the old hosting portal, still active, still under my ID. The logo hadn't even updated. 90 days. That's what the clause said. 90 days after personnel change, a failure to sign the updated transfer rights would void auto-renewal, the account would cancel, hosting would drop, a hard kill, not even a grace period. Because back then, we didn't trust vendors or each other. And right now, they were sitting at day 87. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I got in my car, drove to the bar 3 blocks down, and ordered a club soda. The bartender looked surprised, said I looked like I'd just been dumped. I told him I was just newly single from a 12-year marriage to incompetence. He laughed. I didn't. That night, I pulled every old doc I had, contracts, server logs, termination windows. I cross-checked invoice histories, DNS delegation, cert expiry triggers. They hadn't touched any of it, no new login, no updates. They'd assumed everything auto-renewed with the acquisition, that legal took care of it, that I was too broken to think straight, too loyal to make waves, too predictable to matter. They assumed wrong. I wasn't planning revenge. I was just reading the terms. I found it in a folder labeled Holdover, Do Not Delete, buried between a deprecated asset spreadsheet and a backup diagram for a load balancer we retired in 2016. The original hosting agreement, version 1.3b, finalized under the old LLC name, before the Series A, before the rebrand, before we traded vision for velocity. A scanned PDF with my signature, the old CTO's initials, and a clause circled in red by our first legal intern. Termination of ownership rights pending 90-day administrative consent. At the time, It was just good hygiene. Nobody wanted rogue admins with phantom access. So we added a clause. Any change in controlling personnel required written consent from all parties of the original agreement. No consent, no renewal. No renewal, no service. We called it the ghost clause because if someone disappeared, the system didn't. They'd missed it, all of it. I read through the rest. Nothing had changed. Their shiny acquisition hadn't touched a single foundational contract, no addendums, no revised authorizations, no assignment of ownership, no record of my signature on the new master services agreement they cooked up post-buyout. The system, as far as the law was concerned, was still mine to cancel. I checked the account metadata in the vendor dashboard. Administrator, redacted, at old company. My original company email, still whitelisted in the vendor's off-chain because they hadn't revoked legacy roles. That email forwarded to my personal inbox out of habit, another leftover from my belt and suspenders paranoia. I clicked into it. Every invoice, uptime report, and API health ping from the last 3 months was still being sent to me. They never shut it off. 90 days. That was the window. After a change in controlling personnel, the agreement required confirmation from all original parties. Otherwise, at day 90, the system would enter non-renewable termination. Billing would stop, services would drop, no override, not without me. I didn't scream. I didn't even smile. I closed the folder, made a checklist. Then I opened a new spreadsheet color-coded, naturally labeled the tabs, contract terms, timeline, legal exposure, collateral. It was the kind of thing I used to make for exec reviews before they decided PowerPoint was more strategic. I preferred reality. It doesn't blink during demos. The next day, I logged into a few of our old vendor accounts quietly, discreetly, not to change anything, just to confirm. DNS delegation still tied to my credentials. Database redundancy mapped to physical instances under my name. SSL renewals auto-generated from an email I created in 2014. It was all still mine and all still functioning. Meanwhile, the press releases began. The company, now under its slick new name, something vowelless and insufferable, was teasing a major product relaunch, next-gen scalability, they called it, built on our proprietary infrastructure. They posted a teaser video on LinkedIn with slow-motion footage of a data center they didn't own. I recognized the stock footage. I'd used the same clip in a compliance deck years ago. The CEO was all over social media, talking about speed, scale, and technical debt as a mindset. There was a countdown timer on the homepage, 11 days until the Future of Access event. Journalists were being courted. I even saw an RSVP from a former client who once emailed me at midnight because his cron jobs failed during a snowstorm. None of them knew the Future of Access was running on a contract set to expire in 8 days. I didn't tell anyone, not my lawyer, not my old team, not my cat. I just waited. Every day, I checked the logs, not a single login from their end. They were either completely unaware or arrogantly confident that legal had handled everything. Either way, they were still pushing out updates, building hype, betting everything on a back end they didn't own. It was like watching someone remodel a house without checking the deed. They painted over the walls, swapped out the furniture, even changed the locks, never realizing the land underneath still had my name on it. And every time I saw that countdown tick lower, my hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. I just made tea, logged the timestamp, and waited. It started with a Slack message from a burner account, one of the old engineers, someone I used to pair with during midnight patch cycles and Friday afternoon emergency rollbacks. The message was short, nervous, too casual to be real. Hey, heard you got realigned. Congrats on the freedom. FYI, CEO's planning a full-court press event. Big relaunch. All companies buzzing. Oh, and pretty sure no one's touched the legacy infra. CTO says legal handled it. I stared at that last line like it had teeth. The CTO, who I trained, by the way, was always the type to click accept all and call it a security policy. Smart guy, but allergic to paperwork. The idea that he'd assume legal took care of it didn't surprise me. But the fact that no one had checked the actual systems they were about to march on stage and shout about stability while standing on an unrenewed foundation. It was almost artistic. 7 days left. I didn't respond to the message, just archived it and opened my dashboard. The hosting portal still showed the same status: pending expiration, no attempted overrides, no new access requests, no escalations from the vendor's account team. I ran a quick log check. Last admin activity, me, 2 weeks ago. Nothing for months. I sipped my tea and opened my secure archive. Redundancies are for the paranoid, which meant I was always overprepared. I'd built mirrored logs, timestamped backups, and cold storage failsafes, not because I didn't trust the company, though I didn't, but because I didn't trust fate. And right now, fate was feeling generous. I created a fresh dump of the system logs, not just access history, but heartbeat data, server health checks, TLS handshakes, everything that proved they were still running on my structure. I compressed it, encrypted it, and copied it to 2 drives, one local, one stashed in a fireproof safe behind my father's Korean War medals. Overkill, maybe, but when someone like our new CEO starts bragging about redefining uptime, you better have receipts. That same day, I heard about the press event through a friend still in marketing. They were calling it the future of access. Invitations had gone out to every investor, major client, and press contact who'd ever sniffed a venture capital sniffle. They'd rented out a sleek warehouse venue in the city, projectors, catered hors d'oeuvres, LED panels with looping videos of servers they didn't control. A full brand relaunch, complete with a new slogan, "Own the Moment." I nearly choked on my coffee. They even had the gall to announce a new security certification tier, Fortress Grade, while the infrastructure was still technically leased under my name through an unrevised agreement built for a team that no longer existed. The countdown became part of my routine. I taped a sticky note to my monitor, 7. And every morning, I'd cross it out and write the new number beneath, 654. Each day, they posted another teaser, a new feature, a new interface, an AI integration demo that barely functioned when we tested it a year ago, now repackaged with a new coat of UX lipstick and buzzwords scraped from last month's tech blog headlines. And still no system changes, no contract updates, no contact from legal. They hadn't even bothered to send a follow-up on the NDA I refused to sign. It was like they assumed the acquisition was a magic eraser, that paperwork folded itself, that legacy meant irrelevant. Legacy doesn't mean outdated. It means you're standing on it. 3 days before the event, someone from finance emailed me by mistake, a mass mailer about end-of-quarter usage metrics, the kind we use to send to stakeholders to show value realization. I read the attachment. Uptime, traffic, conversion rate, all flawless, all based on the infrastructure I built, still hosted, still mine, and still no renewal. That night, I took one more system snapshot, cloned it to a private cloud node in Iceland, one of the few places where server data can be legally timestamped to prove ownership retroactively. Expensive, sure, but peace of mind costs more when you're dealing with cowards in expensive suits. Then I deleted the burner Slack account, blocked the sender, erased the cache, not because I was worried, but because I didn't need whispers anymore. The balance had shifted. This was no longer about whether they'd realize the risk. It was about how loud the silence would be when it hit. The email came in at 2:27 p.m. Subject line, urgent, unauthorized use of company affiliation. It was from someone in legal, one of those title-happy junior counsels who probably still believed professionalism was measured in passive-aggressive phrasing. It opened with an unnecessary paragraph about brand clarity post-merger, cited a vague clause from their internal policy manual, and then demanded I remove the phrase "former head of cloud ops at company name" from my LinkedIn profile. Not, please consider, not per legal policy, just remove it immediately. I read it twice, then replied with exactly one sentence, "You may want to check Section 13 of the hosting MSA." Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and made a sandwich. No adrenaline, no spike in heart rate. I didn't even bother to wait for a reply. Section 13, for the record, states that until the full transfer of infrastructure ownership is completed and certified by all original signatories, no party may restrict attribution of administrative authorship or operational lineage for public reference. In plain English, until they get my signature, I can say whatever I want about what I built, including loudly that I built the infrastructure they were about to bet their relaunch on. And speaking of the relaunch, the internal circus had kicked into high gear. I got a text from one of the last honest engineers left in the building, Alan. We weren't close, but we'd shared enough war stories during overnight database restores to call each other friends. He told me he'd tried to raise a flag in the all-hands meeting, asked whether the transition of infrastructure ownership had been completed. The response? The CTO blinked like he didn't understand the question, then mumbled something about how legal handled that weeks ago. Alan pressed again, asked if the hosting vendor had confirmed. The room went quiet. Then, according to Alan, the new CEO stepped in with a grin and said, "Let's stay focused on what matters. Branding infrastructure is old news. We're building vision now." Vision, as in stock animations, vague taglines, and buzzwords they didn't understand printed on banners they couldn't afford. I told Alan not to ask again. I told him calmly that there were less painful ways to be unemployed. He didn't push back, just said, "Understood," and asked me if I was okay. I told him I was better than okay. I told him I was patient. 3 days left. I watched a live stream that afternoon, internal footage someone leaked of the CEO rehearsing for the big event. He stood in front of an LED screen, arms wide like he thought he was Steve Jobs, repeating lines like, "We didn't just inherit innovation. We redefined it. And our foundation isn't what we built on. It's what we built past." They were going to open with that line, "Built past." I nearly choked on my coffee. They showed off a sleek mock-up of the new admin dashboard. I recognized half the UI was the same framework my team coded 3 years ago, reskinned in dark mode and bloated with tooltips no one needed. Still the same load balancing logic under the hood. Still the same endpoint architecture. Still my foundation running silently beneath their ego. I scrolled their investor blog while sipping a beer. Big promises, bigger claims, unmatched uptime, revolutionary data integrity, custom-tailored redundancy protocols. I laughed out loud at that last one. Those custom protocols were literally adapted from the open-source skeleton I contributed to in 2015. And I was still listed as a contributor on GitHub. Whoops. But I didn't correct them. I didn't argue. I just downloaded everything, every claim, every boast, every screenshot that showed they were still using systems they didn't own, because I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even amused. I was documenting. I knew what was coming. Knew how loud it would be when everything went silent. And I knew the look on the CEO's face wouldn't be rage or confusion. It would be fear. Because there's a difference between forgetting to read the fine print and realizing the fine print was written by someone who never forgets. 2 days left, and I was just getting started. The calendar ping came in like any other, one of those quiet, unobtrusive reminders you almost swipe away without thinking. But I didn't. I sat there staring at the line of text like it was sacred scripture, hosting MSA consent deadline, 90 days. 3 days before the press event. Midnight deadline. 1 button. I had set that reminder 12 weeks ago, back when the CEO still thought I'd be too stunned by the severance to do anything but fade into the HR ether. Back when legal still thought boilerplate NDAs held the same weight as infrastructure contracts. Back when they thought legacy was a dirty word instead of the foundation they were still walking on. I opened the portal, same login, same dashboard, same vendor logo in the corner that hadn't changed since 2011. If anyone on their side had tried to access it, there would have been activity logs, security pings, password reset attempts. But there was nothing, not a single footprint. I was still the sole administrator, still the billing contact, still the master key. The screen displayed the status. Contract status active, pending renewal. Renewal date 11:59 p.m. tonight. I hovered over the drop-down, auto-renew enabled. Options: do not renew, renew for 12 months. I clicked do not renew. The screen refreshed. A pop-up appeared for confirmation. By disabling auto-renewal, your infrastructure contract will terminate at the end of the current billing cycle. Services will be suspended unless renewed manually by the authorized primary contact, which was still me. I clicked confirm. The screen blinked once, then returned to the dashboard. Auto-renew disabled. Termination scheduled, midnight, 12 a.m. No alerts, no red flags, no emails to compliance or the CTO or junior interns copying the VP of optics because the system didn't know there had been an acquisition. The system didn't care who wore the new company hoodie or who was printing lanyards for the press event. As far as the system was concerned, I was still in charge. I sat back, the silence of the room humming louder than any fan in the server rack ever could. There was a moment, brief and small, where my hands started to tremble, not from fear, not from regret, from the sheer weight of what I'd just done. I closed the laptop, walked to the kitchen, boiled water, chamomile, the kind of tea you drink when your pulse needs to remember how to slow down. I stood at the counter as the bag steeped. Steam rose from the cup like a signal no one could see. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't fuming or pacing or running scripts in my head. I just smiled, the first time in weeks. A real smile, too, not the strained, polite one you force when someone from finance calls you ops girl or when legal says, "Don't worry, we standardized your paperwork." The smile came from bone-deep knowing. They had built a palace on rented land, and tonight the lease ended. No alarms would ring when midnight hit, no sirens, no flames, just absence. A quiet deletion of certainty. They wouldn't notice at first, maybe not even for a few hours. Everything was cached, propped up by momentum and marketing. But eventually, somewhere in the early hours, when systems refresh and renewals try to process, they'd get the first ping, a 503 error, a failed billing handshake, a DNS record in limbo. Then the scramble would begin. They'd call the vendor. The vendor would tell them to check their admin list. Then legal would pull the agreement. Then someone would dig through emails, only to realize no one ever got my signature. No one followed up. No one closed the loop because they thought I was gone. I lifted the teacup to my lips and exhaled. Watched the countdown on my screen flip another minute closer to midnight. I didn't need revenge. I had resolution, and it tasted exactly like chamomile. The first ripple hit around 3:15 a.m. That's when the CTO, up late rehearsing his technical talking points for the press event, decided to double-check the back-end vendor dashboard, probably to cherry-pick a stat or two about uptime for the big screen. Maybe throw in a line about how infrastructure resilience is a philosophy, not a product. I could practically hear him practicing it in front of a bathroom mirror. Instead, he saw it. Billing status. Pending cancellation. Auto-renew disabled. Termination scheduled. Executed. His stomach must have dropped so hard it cracked tile. They always thought these systems ran on magic, or worse, marketing, as if 99.999% uptime was something you manifested with the right slide deck. He clicked refresh twice, tried to escalate access, but his login, linked through the company's post-acquisition integration, had no admin privileges because no one had added him to the vendor contract. Because no one had finished the transfer. Because I hadn't signed. The next hour was a blur behind their walls, flurries of emails, panic veiled in polite legalese. A junior associate, probably fresh off bar prep and still high on the scent of conference room Sharpies, fired off 3 emails to the vendor's account support team, demanding emergency override access under executive imperative. They were told plainly that, per Clause 9A of the hosting agreement, only the original authorized signatory could initiate renewal or modification. They asked if that clause could be bypassed in the event of a merger. They were told no, because the clause wasn't tied to corporate status. It was tied to personhood. Me. I wasn't watching this happen. I was asleep, deep asleep, the first full night of unbroken rest since they handed me that envelope and grinned like they were handing me a favor. By 7 a.m., the CTO had called twice. The first call was marked as urgent. The second had no label, just the desperation kind where the air is too thick to breathe, and you've already been told to keep your tone down by someone 2 titles below you. I didn't answer. My phone stayed on Do Not Disturb, buzzing uselessly on my nightstand while I sipped coffee and stared out my kitchen window like a woman who'd planted seeds 3 months ago and could finally smell rain in the air. At 8:12 a.m., another wave began. Legal escalated. They tried to submit a new MSA to the vendor, the CEO's signature this time, probably hoping no one would notice the timing. But the vendor flagged the form. The primary admin listed didn't match their records. They needed me, not a name, not a role, me. And since I hadn't authorized renewal before midnight, the system had already flagged the infrastructure as suspended. Grace period, 0. Downtime, ticking. Still, they tried. They emailed me directly, well, not me, the old company address that's still forwarded to my personal inbox. I opened the email while putting away laundry. Subject, urgent, hosting authorization required immediately. I didn't open it. I just archived it. By 9:03 a.m., the vendor's API began returning intermittent authentication failures. Tokens expired. Sessions ended. Traffic routed to an endpoint that no longer existed. Their front end was still cached, still pretending nothing was wrong, but the core was hollow. That's when the CTO called again, not once, 5 times in a row. No voicemail, just raw panic, silent, and buzzing. I placed the phone on the table, watched the screen light up over and over, his name blinking like a broken smoke alarm. I still didn't answer, not out of spite, out of principle. He'd smiled at my exit meeting, thanked me for my years of stability, called me foundational as if that meant something. He didn't even glance at the renewal paperwork, didn't check the logs, didn't read the clause, thought ownership was just a check, thought silence meant surrender. At 10:12 a.m., someone from marketing tweeted a promo video, reimagining reliability. Join us today at 1 p.m. for the future of access. The CTO replied internally to that tweet with one word, delete. No one noticed yet. I washed my coffee mug, took a walk. The storm was growing, not because I stirred it, because they ignored the forecast. And now the roof was coming off. The house lights dimmed, and the room glowed a sterile corporate blue. The new logo, a looping silver infinity symbol that looked suspiciously like a knockoff streaming app, pulsed behind the CEO like a heartbeat pumped full of venture capital. Rows of folding chairs were filled with tech reporters, client liaisons, and a sea of C-suite necks craning toward the stage. Camera crews angled their shots. Remote investors logged in. Microphones blinked red. This was it, the big rebranding event, the future of access. He stepped onto the stage like he owned oxygen. That gait, half smug, half rehearsed, broadcast the same energy as a man walking into his third wedding, expensive, performative, and deeply in denial. The room greeted him with polite applause, the kind you give a magician right before he pulls a rabbit out of a hat you watched him stuff 10 minutes ago. He didn't wait long. "Welcome, everyone," he said, his voice booming through a wireless headset like he was narrating a colonoscopy commercial. Today's not just about a new logo or a shiny new dashboard. It's about vision, velocity, value. A massive screen behind him flashed a bright white slide that read, uptime, 99.998%. The gold standard. A smattering of impressed murmurs rippled across the room. They had no idea those numbers were cached from a system now technically shut off, still showing life like a corpse with its eyes open. He paced the stage like he was preparing to launch a rocket instead of a marketing campaign held together with Canva and caffeine. "We've rebuilt everything," he declared, from the ground up. A new foundation, no more legacy, no more bloat, just performance. Then came the moment. A hand went up. It belonged to a reporter, mid-30s, glasses, notebook tucked under one arm, a freelancer who looked like she was more interested in facts than fluff. The mic runner passed her a wireless, and she asked the question that would detonate the room's oxygen tank. "You speak to the reliability of the cloud infrastructure supporting this new platform. Was the migration complete?" The CEO grinned like a man who thought he was bulletproof. "That old system," he chuckled, waving a hand as if shooing away a memory. "Please, we own it. We rebuilt it better. There's nothing left of the old stack. What you're seeing today is all new, all us. No strings, no risks." It was at that exact moment that the CTO, standing off stage near a table of water bottles and panic, looked down at his phone and froze. One by one, his fingers slid across the screen, opening a thread of messages, emails, and system pings that had just come flooding in. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. From the front row, someone watching via live stream on a company-issued tablet suddenly whispered, "Why is the client portal offline?" Behind the CEO, the giant screen was still pulsing with fake confidence, uptime stats holding steady, a banner beneath it reading, "The future is always on." Another phone buzzed, then another. The CTO's skin had gone the color of bad printer toner. He stepped forward, hand trembling, scribbling something onto a notepad so fast the pen nearly tore through the paper. He shoved the note into the CEO's line of sight mid-sentence. The CEO blinked midriff, then faltered. He glanced down. The camera zoomed in, catching the note as it passed beneath the stage lights. Contract terminated. Hosting gone. Live now. A beat passed. Then another. The CEO opened his mouth like he was about to make a joke, another quip about agility, maybe something self-deprecating about the early days, but nothing came out. Only the sound of him breathing, shaky, too fast. Another reporter, trying to be polite, leaned forward and asked, "Sir, is everything all right?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, because at that very moment, thousands of users nationwide were refreshing login pages that no longer resolved. An investor's phone buzzed with a text from his CTO, "We just lost primary access." A voice whispered in the crowd, "Is this part of the demo?" And the CEO just stood there, still as marble, blinking under the lights as the sound system magnified the one thing he had left, his panicked, shallow breathing. At first, no one in the audience registered what had just happened. The CEO stood there, slack-jawed, still clutching the notepad like it might spontaneously rewrite itself. Behind him, the looping highlight reel of cutting-edge infrastructure and unparalleled scalability continued playing like nothing had gone wrong because, technically, the projector wasn't connected to the infrastructure. Only the rest of their world was. The CTO didn't return to his place by the water bottles. He stood frozen at the edge of the stage, face pale, collar suddenly too tight, eyes darting toward the side entrance like he was calculating escape velocity. Someone from event logistics, probably a contractor, stepped forward and tried to hand him a fresh mic pack, thinking maybe the silence meant equipment failure. It wasn't the mic. It was the moment. The CEO took a small step backward, still trying to maintain composure, a hand raised in that pseudo-casual, "we're fine" motion executives use when trying to keep a leak from becoming a flood. The mic picked up everything, a sharp exhale, a dry gulp, the subtle click of a nervous jaw. He cleared his throat. That was it. Just not a sentence, not a recovery, just the sound of confidence collapsing in real time. Near the back of the room, a reporter frowned and refreshed the company's portal on her tablet. The screen blinked again, then resolved into a white box with a line of gray text, "We're experiencing technical difficulties. Please try again later." She didn't need confirmation from it. She opened her camera and started filming. On another screen, a sales demo tablet locked up mid-pitch. The rep leading the product showcase froze mid-sentence, blinking down at the spinning circle that now served as their brand identity. One by one, phones began vibrating across the room, clients, vendors, internal staff, notifications, warnings, access errors, login failures. One investor leaned over to another and muttered, "Is this a test?" The other shook his head, "It's a collapse." The CTO was whispering furiously into a headset now, trying not to hyperventilate. His other hand was gripped around a company-issued tablet, thumbing through internal dashboards that wouldn't load. A junior comms manager appeared on the side of the stage, mouthing something urgent. The CEO didn't respond. He just kept staring at the notepad in his hand. Contract canceled. Hosting gone. Live now. A few rows back, someone had opened Twitter. #Future of Access was trending, but not for the reasons they'd hoped. Screenshots were circulating, error messages, broken login pages, frozen product demos. A clip from the reporter's live stream was already getting reposted, showing the CEO blinking in silence, cutting to the white error box like a ghostly punchline. I watched it all from my laptop, feet up, tea steeping, system logs open in one tab, Twitter in the other. The portal termination had triggered exactly on time, clean, efficient, final. The log showed what I expected: 12 a.m., contract expiration triggered, 12 o'clock and 1 second a.m., service access terminated, 12 o'clock and 2 seconds a.m., admin privileges nullified, 12 o'clock and 5 seconds a.m. DNS propagation initiated. By now, their dev team would be scrambling, pulling dead weight from repositories, sifting through codebases they never understood, calling in favors from vendors already closing their books for the quarter. But nothing could fix what was already gone. You can't reboot trust. You can't refresh oversight. You can't restore what you never bothered to understand. On stage, the CEO finally tried again. He raised the mic to his lips, took a deep breath, his voice cracked. "We're experiencing a temporary technical." The sound cut out. The light stayed on. But everything else, their product, their promise, their platform, was already gone. And in that heavy, exposed silence, the only thing anyone could hear anymore was him breathing. The dashboard didn't blink. It just sat there, stoic and final, like a tombstone with metrics. Contract terminated. Services offline. Admin revoked. No fireworks, no celebratory music, just the clean, uncluttered aftermath of a job done right. I sipped my wine, cheap Merlot, in a chipped mug I got at a developer conference 8 years ago, and leaned back in my chair. Peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the absence of noise that screams the loudest. The livestream replay had already gone viral, not just on Twitter, but everywhere. LinkedIn posts dissecting the failure of leadership communication. TikTok's lip-syncing the CEO's panicked breath into EDM remixes. Reddit threads titled, "When your backend ghosts you mid-pitch." The thumbnail was already iconic, the CEO blinking hard, one hand half-raised, lips parted like he was about to explain away a black hole. The notepad was visible in the shot. People zoomed in, speculated, theories flew. What happened? Trended across 3 platforms. I could have told them, but I didn't. I never broke a law, never hacked a thing, never sent a threat or raised my voice or called in a favor. I just read the contract, followed the clause, clicked the option they left behind. They wrote their future in fine print and never bothered to read it. The best part, the fallout wasn't just technical. It was existential. Clients were already tweeting about broken access. Partner platforms were issuing vague statements about unexpected downtime. And investors, God bless their immediate panic, were posting questions in public forums. Anyone know what happened at company today? Should we be worried about architecture integrity? Why is their product page offline? The silence had become contagious. At 9:42 p.m., an email arrived from the CTO. Just one line, subject, no subject, body, we need to talk. I read it once, then again, not for content, there wasn't any, but for tone. There was no please, no explanation, no humility, just a flailing attempt to claw back the ground they'd let rot beneath their own feet. I clicked archive, then block, then turned off my phone entirely. Let them scramble. Let them hold emergency calls at midnight and draft apology tweets and fumble through temporary redirect pages that looked like parking tickets. Let them call consultants and lawyers and ex-interns who might remember how to restore a production environment under duress. I wouldn't hear any of it. I snapped the dashboard shut, closed my laptop, and puffed out the candle on the kitchen counter. Outside, the street was hushed, just the wind, rustling leaves, and faint traffic hum, unbothered by some cocky CEO caught peddling a product based on papers he never bothered to read. I strolled to the window and peered into the night. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't, because in a rented venue, still reeking of champagne and stage lights, a guy with too much hair gel and too little regard for contracts was gasping into a mic he forgot to mute. That sound, panic cutting through silence, that was the payoff. Not revenge, not fury, just the quiet that follows a sharp, calculated move. The kind of quiet when the world sees you weren't joking. That silence? It wasn't free. I earned it. You're the true heroes of the corporate wild. Thanks for sticking with me. Hit subscribe or I'll flip the switch on those dusty cubicle memories.